Out in the wild, survival is all about resourcefulness, about using what you've got to make it through. But what happens when the tools and techniques that once kept you alive are now considered illegal? Over the years, laws and regulations have shifted like the sands of the Sahara. What was once commonplace for our ancestors, like carrying a flintlock pistol or building a hidden shelter, can now raise eyebrows. That's why in this adventure, we're diving deep into the history of 11 survival items that have gone from essential to outlawed. We'll explore their past, understand their present legal status, and make sure you're equipped with the knowledge to survive, both in the wild and within the bounds of the law. Remember, staying informed is as crucial as staying hydrated out there. Imagine yourself thrust back in time to the 19th century. The air is thick with wood smoke. The only light comes from flickering candles, and the wilderness is a constant presence. Life was brutal, unforgiving. Survival was a daily challenge, not a weekend hobby. Back then, folks relied on ingenuity and grit. They used what they could find, what they could craft with their own two hands. Tools were simple, often repurposed for multiple uses. A sturdy knife wasn't just for preparing food, it was for defense, for building, for everything. Fire was life itself, and starting one was a far cry from our modern conveniences. Forget your fancy lighters and waterproof matches. Folks relied on flint and steel, striking sparks with calloused fingers. It was a time of raw survival, where the line between resourcefulness and what we now consider outlawed was blurred at best. The crack of a flintlock pistol was once as familiar a sound as birdsong in the untamed wilds of the past. These weren't just weapons, they were lifelines. Picture this, you're miles from civilization, dense forests pressing in on all sides. Your heart pounds with every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig. A flintlock pistol, slow to reload as it may have been, offered more than just a fighting chance against a predator. It was a deterrent, a symbol of strength in a world where survival was often measured in heartbeats. But times change, don't they? Today, the trusty flintlock, once a symbol of frontier resilience, is often regulated, viewed more as a historical artifact than a practical tool. While owning a flintlock might be perfectly legal depending on where you are, carrying one for self-defense, that's a different story altogether. The modern survivalist needs to be aware of these legal complexities. Now let's talk about something that goes boom. I'm not talking about fireworks on the 4th of July, but about homemade explosives. Back in the day, these were sometimes necessary tools for survival, used for everything from clearing land to creating signals in an emergency. Imagine needing to clear a path through dense undergrowth for shelter, or signaling for help after being stranded by a landslide. Desperate times, right? People used to create rudimentary explosives with whatever they could scavenge. Fast forward to today, and the very mention of homemade explosives sends shivers down spines. The dangers associated with homemade explosives, from accidental detonation to misuse, far outweigh their potential benefits in a modern survival context. Leave this one in the history books, folks. Poaching tools, a delicate balance between sustenance and sustainability. Let's be clear. I'm a firm believer in respecting wildlife and only hunting or trapping when absolutely necessary for survival. But history paints a complicated picture. In the past, poaching tools were often survival tools. Snares, traps, and even simple slingshots meant the difference between an empty stomach and a meal. It was about sustenance, pure and simple. But as our world changed, so did our relationship with nature. We realized the impact of overhunting, the need to protect vulnerable species. Today, poaching tools are often viewed through the lens of conservation. It's a stark reminder that survival isn't just about our own immediate needs, but about respecting the delicate balance of the natural world. Moonshine stills, from backwoods necessity to regulated craft. The scent of corn mash fermenting under a watchful eye, the hiss of steam escaping a copper still. It's a scene straight out of a history book, isn't it? Moonshine, that potent backwoods brew, has a long and colorful past. In times gone by, it wasn't just about a stiff drink, it was about resourcefulness. Farmers used stills to turn excess grain into a tradable commodity, a way to make ends meet when times were tough. But moonshine also had a dark side, often associated with illegal production and dangerous practices. Today, while the romance of the backwoods still might linger, the legal realities are clear. Distilling your own spirits without the proper licenses and permits can land you in hot water faster than you can say white lightning. Lockpicking kits, from handy tools to legal gray areas. Now let's talk about a skill set that walks a fine line, lockpicking. In the past, knowing how to bypass a lock wasn't always about nefarious intentions. Imagine finding yourself locked out of your cabin in the middle of nowhere, miles from help. A simple lockpicking set could mean the difference between a minor inconvenience and a night exposed to the elements. But as with many things, the line between resourcefulness and illegality can be thin. Lockpicking tools, while readily available, often come with a legal disclaimer. It's all about intent, and the law often struggles to differentiate between a survivalist in a pinch and someone with criminal intent. If you choose to acquire lockpicking skills, make sure you're doing so responsibly and ethically. Concealed weapons, a shifting landscape of self-defense. Out in the wild, the concept of self-defense takes on a whole new meaning. It's not just about protecting yourself from two-legged threats, but from creatures with more teeth and claws than you can count. Historically, concealed weapons were as much a part of everyday carry as a compass or a good knife. From hidden blades to compact firearms, people took personal safety seriously. But as society evolved, so did our attitudes towards concealed weapons. What was once commonplace is now subject to a complex web of laws and regulations. The right to bear arms, while fiercely debated, varies wildly from place to place. Know the laws inside and out wherever your adventures take you. Counterfeit currency tools, a relic of desperate times. Now let's talk about something you definitely shouldn't try at home: counterfeiting. In the past, especially during times of economic hardship, people resorted to desperate measures to survive. Counterfeiting tools, from rudimentary engraving plates to homemade inks, offered a risky lifeline. But the consequences of getting caught were severe, often far outweighing any potential benefits. Today, it's not just illegal, it's foolish. The risks far outweigh any potential rewards, and the legal repercussions can be life-altering. Focus on honing your skills, not on finding shortcuts that could land you in deep trouble. Signal mirrors, from distress signals to everyday essentials. Let's talk about a survival tool that stood the test of time: the signal mirror. This unassuming piece of kit has been a lifeline for countless adventurers, lost hikers, and downed pilots. In the past, a signal mirror was often the only way to call for help in a vast and unforgiving wilderness. The flash of sunlight reflecting off its surface could be seen for miles, a beacon of hope in desperate times. But here's the interesting part. Signal mirrors haven't lost their relevance in our modern world. Sure, we've got GPS devices, satellite phones, and all sorts of fancy gadgets, but technology fails, batteries die, and when that happens, a simple signal mirror can become your most valuable asset. It's lightweight, inexpensive, and could one day save your life. Improvised shelters, adapting to the elements then and now. Shelter, it's one of the most basic human needs, right up there with food, water, and the latest episode of your favorite survival show. And throughout history, people have been adapting to their surroundings, creating shelter from whatever nature threw their way. Think back to our ancestors, seeking refuge in caves, building lean-tos from branches and leaves. These weren't just shelters, they were acts of defiance against the elements. Today, it's less about surviving in the wilderness and more about being prepared for unexpected situations. Knowing how to create a makeshift shelter from everyday materials can provide a crucial sense of security in an uncertain world. Camouflage clothing, from hunting garb to tactical gear, blending in, becoming one with your surroundings. It's an art form as old as time itself, and camouflage clothing has played a pivotal role throughout history. Hunters relied on camouflage to stalk prey. Soldiers used it to gain a tactical advantage, and survivalists have long understood the importance of disappearing into the landscape. But just like everything else we've discussed, the perception and legality of camouflage clothing have evolved. While once primarily associated with hunting, camouflage has found its way into mainstream fashion. So while rocking a camo jacket in the city might turn heads, it's crucial to be mindful of local laws and regulations. Outlaw survival evolves, and so must you. We've journeyed through time, explored the evolution of 11 survival items, and uncovered how their legality has shifted with the changing tides. It's been quite an adventure, hasn't it? Remember, survival is about adaptation. It's about respecting the past, understanding the present, and always being prepared for the unexpected. The wilderness, just like the legal landscape, is constantly changing, so stay informed, stay sharp, and never stop learning.